Hello and welcome to another live stream edition of the John Keim Report. Do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can catch us on YouTube after the show as part of Ampire Media, Ampire, and you can subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And always appreciate you tuning in, especially in years like this, which have not been very good for anybody and anybody's health. So it's a Therapy Tuesday session for you guys. And as Nicki Jhabvala, my guest tonight, asked me before we went on, who's providing the therapy for us? So I don't know. We catch a lot, you're going to catch a lot of bullets, stray bullets from doing all this, but it doesn't get easy for a beat reporter. Nicki, let's start there. So we got 4
weeks. This
is
about us, John.
It's not about us. But listen, I want people to feel our pain too, because it is important. By the way, you can read Nicki in the Washington Post. You can read my work on ESPN.com. There you go. But it is right now, it is about us. So for the next 5 weeks, as a beat reporter in a situation like this, what are the challenges?
Yes, not great. No, I mean, it's either way, like you cover the stories, but yeah, I mean, you're nobody wants to talk to us, and I don't blame them. If I have a bad day on the job, I don't want to go talk publicly about it. So that's tough. There's people are less forthcoming. They don't want to discuss it. And you feel like you're just kind of writing the same thing over and over again. It's, oh, they lost this week. Oh, how's Sam Howell doing this week? Is he the future? Is this person the future? What are they going to do after the season? So it becomes a bit mundane. But, par for the course.
It is. And I think that the other challenge too is looking ahead while people are still here. And, people have a job and you want to be respectful to that job. And yet, where things are going. And that's always, you need to be respectful with everything. Right. But it is a weird situation because there's four
games up. Yeah. I mean, they're not officially out of it, but they're out of it, it's over. So yeah, it's, and you kind of feel like that part is very difficult. And I don't like that at all, because they're human. They're humans nonetheless, and it's a tough situation,
It is, and at some point, I think everybody kind of knows what's going on, and then, but that's even there's some discomfort to all that, but that's part of the job, and you move on. But it's also the hard part too is you go to the games. It's just like when you watch these last 2 games, the Dolphins especially. Yeah. At least Dallas was interesting for 3 quarters.
Yes.
Miami was difficult. To
yes.
So it was
it was bad from the start.
Yes, it was. So let's get to a couple of topics here. And I wanted to ask you about John Allen went on the Junkies and was basically in paraphrasing. They asked him if he had thought about playing elsewhere. And he said 1,000% he has. Now, I think he's made it clear that he would like to be here. Mm-hmm. And because he's from here, and I know and talking to people close to him, I've heard this from other veterans, Nicki, over the years, like when Ryan Kerrigan was here, he didn't want to leave because it's like when things turn around there, I want to be there.
Sure.
So, But what did you make of those comments?
I mean, I wasn't terribly surprised. I mean, he's especially coming from a program like Alabama, where you're used to winning, not just winning, but dominating a lot of the time, to basically the bottom in the NFL, where it's losing season after losing season. I mean, it's been 7 consecutive years of non-winning records. So it's the frustration, especially coming off the game, because when he talked to the Junkies, it was literally the morning after the Dolphins game. I'm sure the frustration and the emotions were high. So I'm not terribly surprised, but the reality is this: he's got 2 years left on his deal, or 1 year left on his deal? 2 years, I think.
I think it's 2.
2 years, but
no guaranteed. I think
no guaranteed, which means they still own his rights, and they have the leverage on whether they would want to move on. He's still a quality player in this league, and I still think, he's a key player for this team. I would argue that he hasn't played up to his full potential this season, to put it politely. So I understand his frustration completely, but I think the onus is, on everybody for how the season went, including him. He had some production, but, I think
It's
a
not what
number
it
of
was.
people. Right, exactly.
And
So
I wonder if because he had that plantar fasciitis issue earlier in the year, and I think that doesn't go away.
no, yeah,
And so
that's hard to play with. When you're a pass rusher, especially, that's tough.
yes, it
But
is tough. And so I wonder about that, not to give him excuses, but like it's a legit thing. I mean, I've talked to players over the years who've had that, and it can affect how you go. I've talked to him about that, and he wouldn't use as an excuse.
yeah,
But and I think there's a whole mess of issues with that. But I also wonder too, we don't know who's going to be in charge of this next year.
right, right.
But if you know that a guy's thinking like that, I wonder how it might appear to someone else.
Right. I mean,
Or
every coach, every executive says, we want guys that want to be here. So, and again, I think that was emotions were high after the loss. Yes, he does want to win. I think every player would say that. But as you preface, like he's been invested the longest
yeah,
outside of Tress Way. So, you know, yeah, I would think he'd want to be part of that turnaround since he helped it get to this point.
yeah, and I also because like it meant something to him as much as anybody. It meant something to him at the Josh Harris presser when he was
Yeah.
talking about seeing the crowd and the energy and all that. That's what some of these guys have lived for. And again, as someone who grew up here, and I also think for him, and again, you talk to people like you know him well. It's like, well, he's the kind of guy. If you see a path to winning, it changes the perspective. So, because like my thing what I would wonder if I'm another prospective coach, GM, or you come in and like, he said this, I would want to talk to him and say, can you go through this again? What if it gets to this point? I'm guessing part of his reply might be as long as you see that path to success at the end. And I think this was the year where he stopped seeing that. And because just based on his comments after games, I don't think he clearly didn't see that anymore. Yeah. He was saying nothing was changing. So I wonder if that would be a big deal for him to see that.
Yeah, and it should be. He's 28. Everybody knows when you hit 30, no matter the position in the league, that the value of what you can do is dropped significantly. Even if you're still a great pass rusher, a great receiver, whatever, the narrative sort of changes once you hit that mark. So I would imagine that a lot of these veterans who have been here a while, they see another season where there's significant optimism going in and it doesn't pan out, that you're just kind of like, am I wasting my prime in doing this? And it's I think it's fair. I think everybody has a hand in it, but it's something you have to consider when these careers are as short as they are.
Right. And you listen, anybody coming in is, I don't know that I have no idea what anybody's coming in thinking. So it's impossible to know who's off the table, who isn't. Right. And then also like, how do you view building a roster? Because if you want to build it and you have 2 D tackles, you say, listen, it wasn't their best year, neither one of them. They haven't had the impact they've had in previous years overall. They're still very good players.
Yeah.
But then it gives you that building block for the interior to play. And so you have to be careful with that. And if you think the guy can still play, but again, like, I don't know. Well, I don't know. And this is something that somebody was asking here, which is, Rivera, they wonder if based on this guy Juan wants to know based on the comments from John and Antonio Gibson about the growth and development, are they just words like yes? Does that a sign that Ron has lost the locker room? I think it's just I think they're just tired of the situation and losing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the players are just going to quit on the season. This is what they've trained for their whole life. And these problems have been going on for a while now.
Yeah.
And they're not completely out of it. They'll get there, but they're not completely out of it. So I haven't seen that yet from this group, and they've faced a good bit of adversity over the years, especially late in seasons where it feels like they're close and things just slip away and they still haven't quit. But I think what these guys are saying is a product of their general frustration, which in turn shows they care.
Right. And I think the one thing too, to keep in mind when people talk about quitting, where you see it, when guys start to get that, it's during the week because they're not putting in the same prep. But you have a lot of guys who are playing for something now. Like
Right.
Sam Howell, the last guy who's going to quit is Sam Howell. Like Terry
Right.
McLaurin is not going to quit, right? Antonio Gibson's playing for a contract.
Yeah, he's going to
You
be a
know,
free
yeah.
agent.
Listen, they're all like Brian Robinson will be here next year, probably. I would assume I would
Yeah.
keep him. Why not? But he's playing for the next whoever's going to coach him next
Right.
year.
Right.
So, like, there's all this. Jamin Davis, same thing. You know, Cam Curl playing for a contract.
Right.
So Percy Butler playing for his future.
Right.
You know, so I think, and Benjamin St. Juice, and can Emmanuel Force come back? So I think there's a lot of guys that have something to play for other than just. So I don't think it's as simple as like, oh, they've quit on the coach. I think part of the problem is last couple weeks they played really good teams and they're not that good.
Right. Right. No, and I honestly I've found it a bit surprising. I knew, they were never a perfect roster going in. I don't know that any team is. We knew their weaknesses going in, but their strengths have proven to be their weaknesses too. I mean, I thought the secondary would be better. The defense as a whole would be kind of the leader of the group, and it's been a liability. So I think I'm curious if a number of players are kind of surprised by that fact too. Like they went into it with similar expectations that we did, and they're just, they're the ones out there, but it's also just like, what the heck, man?
I think the last time I was as surprised by a season as this was 2013. And I know you weren't here, and I was in only my 30th year covering the team. So that's a joke. It's a joke. Not far off, but it's a joke. But, that year you go into the year and, okay, Robert's coming back from the injury. He's going to be back for the first game, all in for week 1.
Right.
And they did this. They won all these games, and they should be, so one of the two people on this was really dumb and put him in the NFC Championship game that year, and they won 3 games because you didn't know all the stuff that was bubbling underneath the surface until like there were some things you started hearing in training camp. It's like, oh, this is a concern, but like, Robert was this guy last year, and we saw this and this and blah blah. And this year, it surprised me quite a bit as well. I didn't think they're going to be that good, but I thought they'd be better. I mean, I thought they'd win. I thought they could win 8 or 9 games and make it tough on a decision to keep the staff, right? But I think I've been as wrong on this one, but I think everybody probably has. So, and I kind of blame you because you kept in training camp telling me like, just watch 13 wins. I'm telling you, and I don't know why I listened to you.
Well, serves you right.
Yeah.
Also, where's my therapy? Like, come on. Like, I got to listen to this. Where's my therapy?
You've got 2 therapy dogs somewhere in that house.
Support animals are wonderful.
But it is like, did not see it coming this bad. What about like, so let's get to Sam Howell, because that's the other big question going forward is what have you seen from him lately? What do you need to see from him over the next 4 weeks?
I'll be honest, I felt a lot better about Sam Howell about 3 weeks ago. The last couple of weeks have been tough, and it's more the inconsistency that I struggle with, because I felt like, up until that point, he had shown fairly steady progress. He had his off days. The Chicago game certainly stands out, but on the whole, I thought he showed a number of really good things. These last couple of games where he's had like 3 weeks, 3 pick sixes. That's a concern. Is he making repeated mistakes? The sacks too, but they haven't been as frequent as before. But I think every individual needs to be taken in context. Like the way he's playing, yes, part of it is on him, no doubt. But is he getting the protection he needs? Are the receivers running the right routes? Are they getting open? The defense is not doing them any favors. Are they making the right calls for what they should be? So it's the totality of how the team is performing, and that it's magnified more with him because he is the quarterbacks. But I still think it needs to be taken into context. So it makes his future, at least in my mind, a little more vague. Like I feel a little less confident in him going into next season, but I still think he's shown enough that you want to see where it leads, because he still can do things that you just can't find. He's not playing at an elite level by any stretch, but his touchdown run, I thought that was great. I just think his mobility, his arm, you saw some progress. I think he's a good worker. Like I just, it's hard. There's a reason there's only 32 of these guys. It's hard to find them. So when you find like any semblance of one, I think you got to really develop it and hone those skills.
Yeah, and I think the only reason why it will become a question in the offseason, probably or a big where it could be, depending on what whoever comes in says, is because of where they're going to be drafting.
Right.
And then it's like, do you have a
Yeah.
Do you have a chance at someone else? But the thing that I go back to with him is he just got some intrinsic qualities that I just like. Like there's a toughness to him,
Right.
And I was talking to someone in the organization was like, what he has survived here has been really impressive. Like the way he's handled the situation has been really impressive. And you can't, if you're looking for a guy, like that's the kind of guy that I want to build around. Now, the question then becomes like, can you get him in a system or, how can you help him? How can you better protect him to give him that time to get the ball down the field? Can you do that? And if so, what's his ceiling at that point?
Right.
And my thing, if you're a GM and a coach, they're not tied to him. And I don't think Josh Harris is going to tell him, this is my guy.
Right.
I think they may like him, but do you see that? I don't think there's any way Josh Harris does that.
No, I don't. I mean, just from what I've seen of Josh Harris and looking at his track record with the 76ers, the New Jersey Devils, and his other teams, like he's involved, but he's not meddling to that degree. I think if you're going to hire these people, you empower them. So if you're going to bring on a GM, a true GM, not like the GM they have in this coach-centric model, then you have to empower them to build the staff and to evaluate the players as they see fit. I mean, otherwise, what are we doing here? And we've seen how that pseudo GM model works. It doesn't, so I don't think he would, put any mandates on it. And I think he's smart enough to know that he shouldn't, for the reasons we described. If they have a top 5 pick, you got to keep all your options open. It always kind of irks me when teams who need a quarterback or rather who are not set on their quarterback fail to take one when they have a top 5 pick. You'd like to think that you're not going to be in the top 5 all the time. So if you're going to have a pick that high, don't squander it. Like I understand the reasons why Washington chose Chase Young at 2 in 2020. It made sense given the circumstances. In hindsight, it's always 2020, right? But they had Dwayne Haskins, and he was handpicked by the owner. And what are you going to do? But if you need a quarterback, it's a tough position to pass up if you're there.
And I'll just, for those at home listening, like you say this a lot. I mean, Nicki said this a lot. Now, a lot of times I don't listen to what you say. I just kind of hear blah, blah, blah. And I just wait so I can say something funny and, that's it. But I'm just kidding. But like Nicki's, you're right. Like, and I'm not kidding because you've been consistent with that.
Denver did it with Bradley Chubb, who's a very good pass rusher, but he wasn't the player they needed at the time. They needed a quarterback, and they went pass rusher for the 18 millionth time, and it bugged me then, and it still bugs me. Yeah, I love Bradley Chubb, though. Sorry, Bradley.
Well, but I think to your point, I think this is the one thing. If you come in here and Josh Harris has told you as a GM you're going with this guy, does it maybe give you pause as to whether or not you want to come here? Because it's not just about Sam Howell, then it's about, okay, what other personnel decisions is he going to tell me you have to do? We've been down that road for 24 years. Like it doesn't work. And I don't think that's Josh Harris's style. Now, it may be that he says, yeah, we like him, but this is your call. And it may very well be they get to the same point where a lot of other people are at that, this kid can play. And if you don't have a shot at one of the top quarterbacks, and he's like, okay, the other guys, I'm going to build around Sam.
Right.
No problem with that. Because like I said, I think there's a lot to like about him, a lot. Right. And, I think you can win with him, to what degree, I don't know, because they've got to improve stuff around him too. So,
and I don't think he's been given a full chance to really show what he can do. I mean, he wasn't given a great line to begin with. He's and he could very well be on his second coordinator and play caller in 3 years, or his third play caller and coordinator in 3 years. So that's an added challenge. But, given the circumstances of the team, I don't know that he was given a totally fair shot. Now, you could argue what quarterback is, but if you're going to make these changes and there's enough intrigue with him, there's enough potential that he's shown, I think it's worth seeing it through.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there's a lot to like with him that you can build around. And, again, if he had gone higher in the draft, I don't know that we're having this discussion, but he didn't. So we are. But we also know how this game works. Like if they go out and get a Ben Johnson or Frank Smith, whomever, they may have different ideas about what they want or who they want.
Yeah.
And then you go in that direction. But if nothing else, I think he'd be here, but I think he's shown enough to show like you can win with him. And are there any, what else are you looking for in these next couple of weeks?
Probably younger players. I think this is a good time where you're kind of taking inventory of what they do have on this team. Because I think their list of needs going into the offseason is going to be quite long. That however much cap space, I mean, we don't know the salary cap for 2024 yet, so projections vary. However much they have, and it should be a good bit, could go quickly. I mean, if a new GM, new coach thinks they need 2 tackles, which they could very well make an argument, they rebuild that line. You need tight ends. Curtis Samuel is going to be a free agent. You need another receiver, backs if you're not keeping Gibson. Defensive ends, you need like 3 of them. I mean, linebackers, all of them. Cornerbacks. I mean, the list goes on. Like. And they're premium positions, a lot of these. So that money will go quick.
Yes.
So, I mean, I want to see which of these young players can actually be viable options for the team.
Who are the young guys that you say, like, because part of it is like, first of all, Emmanuel Forbes, you want to see him get back out there. Now he's going to be here as a first round pick.
Is a fully guaranteed for
Right, exactly. But I still want to see where is his progress at. Quan Martin, how does he progress?
Quan's a big one. The pass rushers, KJ Henry, Andre Jones, can they be reliable? They may not be starters, but can they be at least reliable reserves?
They have to show they can be reliable rotation guys. One of them has to emerge that way.
Yes. Yeah. Ricky Stromberg injured. You're not going to see much of him. Chris Rodriguez, I think, would be an important piece. I'd like to see him get a little bit more time.
Yeah.
The tricky balance is like you want to give your young players time, but you also don't want to send the message like we were talking about earlier to the veterans that, we're just quitting on the season. So let's just throw the whole bench in there, like everybody knows the reality, and I'm sure, a lot of veterans probably, maybe some would welcome it at this point. Like, I don't want to get hurt before free agency, but
yeah.
But you got to be careful with that one. And they still play some good teams,
That's the problem. And I like
the Niners come in,
the Rams are playing
Dallas
well
again.
I mean, shoot, the Jets have a good defense, but for me, like what I want to see is some level of improvement from the offense. Cause to me, it's certainly gone back. And it's funny. I was talking about this with someone today, just about like when you watch some of the receiver stuff and like, it just never seems to have been fluid, cohesive, rhythmic and anything like that as far as the routes, the separation, the spacing, all that stuff. And like, that's something that to me has been a bit puzzling. And so like, is there any level of improvement over the next few weeks with that? Do we see Sam and Terry McLaurin develop any sort of, more of a connection, right? And it's not all on one or the other, because sometimes it's the line not giving him time and they're, he's open on a dig, but he doesn't have time to get there. But, can they get there? So like you want to see, because that's something going forward that you would think is important, especially if they're both going to be back there next year. Right. So, those are some of the things that, and I don't know, like with Bieniemy, if there's anything that's really going to be there for him. Can he, to me,
it depends on who they bring in as a head coach or GM. If it's an offensive minded head coach, like a Ben Johnson,
there's no way.
Then it's a moot point. Like Ben Johnson's going to call the plays. It doesn't matter who's coordinator. Like that's his, defensive minded, I think he has a chance. Maybe they at least interview him for a head coaching job if they, really begin that search. But, nothing's guaranteed in this league, but he's on a year deal and, this is a reality.
It is. And I think it's going to be hard for anybody here to stick around. Yeah. The reality is, but again, if it's offensive guy, it doesn't make sense because they're calling the plays. They're hired because they're acumen. Right. And, even if it's a defensive guy, then there's at least you get interviewed
Right.
because, you just do. And,
Right.
but then even then it's like, to me, if you're a defensive guy, the number one thing that I think you have to do is have a good plan in place with that staff,
Mhm.
the offensive staff, because if you lose a guy, you don't want to lose all continuity. And, so you better have succession plans in place.
Right.
So that's what I would say. So I'm going to get to a couple of questions here for a couple minutes. So Silver Fox wants to know, do you know if Josh Harris has a history of empowering the GMs and coaches he's hired for his other teams to make personnel decisions?
Yes, he
Yes,
has.
he has. Yeah.
I mean, he's been involved, like when they sign, big contracts. Yeah, he's involved, like every owner is. But he's empowered the people to make the decisions that they see fit. You look at Daryl Morey, he's actually president with the 76ers, but he's the head personnel guy, and yeah, he makes the decisions.
So, and here's another one from Lewis. What team do you think is the best talent evaluators in the NFL? Do you think anyone from that team could be with Washington next season?
I would look at San Francisco. There's a guy there named Adam Peters.
Adam Peters.
A big name in the GM cycle this year.
He will be. And I think, I know he has ties to that area, and, we'll see what he decides to do. But yes, he's going to be a name. And there's also, I think, another team that I think has been a great organization for a long time is Seattle. Mm-hmm. And there are some assistants to John Schneider who I think are going to be, I can't remember his name, Nolan. God bless it, I'm forgetting the name. But I think that's a team that I would look at as well. I think the other teams that you have to look at, do they have ties to Philadelphia? Were they there? Were they in Baltimore? Because those are
Eugene Shen. I think he will have an impact in all of this, and he was in Baltimore for a good bit. Miami's another one.
Yeah. So there are definitely. Yeah. So I think I'd look at some of those teams too, because it's the talent they churn out. But I wouldn't get. What I'd also want to make sure is not to dismiss other guys if they're not with those kind of teams, because there are, like we've seen here, like everybody loves Kyle Smith. This team wasn't really great when he was here, but I thought he was a good evaluator. I thought he did a good job. And so I think you don't want to dismiss if a guy just comes from a certain situation, because how talented is that guy? And there's good talent even in bad situations.
Right.
So I
Nolan
think
Teasley, by the way.
What's that?
Nolan Teasley.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, that is the guy. And I think but again, that's a good organization. So you would want to pluck guys from those kind of organizations.
Right.
So let me see what else we have here. Well, we kind of just addressed this, but I want to kind of go a little bit more. Tom wants to know, what point does it make sense with any vets just to shut them down and get young guys like Mathis, various practice squad guys. Again, and you just answered it, so I'll just say, I think there's some guys does Jabril Cox have a future at all here? Would you like to see him a little bit more? If so, I think guys like that, but Mason Brooks, but I don't think these are guys that necessarily factor into some sort of starting role next year. They're more roster spot guys. Yeah. And which is okay. You need that too, but I don't look at guys, I don't think you play guys just to play them. I think they have to be guys, especially if you want to see them, you want to make sure that they have something they can offer down the road. Just being young is enough. You got to offer something. That's why, again, some of the young guys you brought up, Rodriguez, the two ends, you need to see them, because regardless of who's here, they are under contract. And so they're more a part of the future than some other folks.
And seeing guys in only one game, they can flash. And for Sam Howell, it worked quite a bit. But again, he was a draft pick, so that was a big sticking point, and his position. But seeing guys in one game, it's not enough to determine if they're going to be a key piece of your future.
Right. And I think that's a big thing. So another one, DC Destiny. Do you think there's merit to try? And this is an off-season question, but I would have a quick take on this, trading any of their best players like Terry, Payne, John Allen at the end of the year. Who would you trade or not trade?
Payne, that's a tough contract to,
you can't move that.
You can't move Payne.
Yeah.
John Allen, I think after the structure of his contract becomes more feasible to have, some flexibility there. They could restructure him. They could cut him after a year if they feel so. there's flexibility there. Terry, he's got significant money left. And it'll be hard to find a trade partner. That's the other thing is, everybody wants to throw out trades, but you have to have a trade partner.
Exactly.
So I think that would be tough. And, some of these are foundational players that you want to keep. I mean, I think Terry is a guy that you want to keep in the building no matter what.
Of course. And, you need, and because I would say this, you always need to improve your organization. And so I think anytime you do that, you look at every scenario, and then it's like, well, does it make sense? And if it does, and you can get value for it, then you make moves. But I think Terry would be a real hard one. I think all those guys would be hard to move on from, especially if they want to be here. And I think the big key is then how long do you see it taking to turn around? Because I think someone else wanted to know, and I'm going to get into this, Nathaniel. He had a question here about comparing this to the end of the Gruden era. I think that's for a longer discussion to see where they're really at, what they still need. But that'll be a discussion at some other point. But I do think it depends on how does someone else see this roster and how big is that would they consider this as a rebuild? Because you're going to have, that's what it is at this point. Yeah. But can they make it quick if you get a couple moves and if you think this guy can be a good quarterback, et cetera, then it can go a little bit faster. So anyways, Nicki, thanks for joining me. Always great. Everybody read her work on at thewashingtonpost.com and follow her on Twitter at Nicki, Jhabvala. There you go. There you go. Thanks as always. Always great. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll be back on Thursday with another episode. So thanks again, and I'll talk to you next time.